Hello again and welcome back to Chop Props. Continuing on in our wiring series for cosplayers, we're going to take a look at soldering today. So probably be a multi-part short series specifically on soldering, because we're going to cover everything from soldering irons to soldering the wires, things like that, joining the wires together. This first section is going to cover specifically using these tools here to solder. Alrighty, so we have a couple different kinds of soldering irons. There's ones that you can actually control the heat. There's ones that are kind of plug and play and or torch and play. So we'll kind of go over the pros and cons for each type. Let's start with these guys here. These old plug and plays, probably most familiar with. You plug it in, no temperature control, booch, shove it in, heat it up, solder, boom, you're done, right? Well, not really. If you're starting out and you want to get one of these cheapies just to practice soldering, these are fine. But if you're going to be, into cosplay and doing a lot more soldering, knowing how to solder comes in really handy, because you can fix a lot of electronics around your house. Broken headphones, wiring, any kind of wire that's broken that you gotta splice back together. Using those little twisty things on small wires, not too good. Those are meant for more like house wiring, things like that. You want to solder, probably gonna want to stay away from this guy. Plus these little holder things that they give you, the crap. First little knock, comes right off, burns everything around you, maybe your hand and fingers. You don't want that. Get that out of there. So, all right. Another type of kind of plug and play iron is the butane. So typically they come with a torch thing like this, a little tip like that, and what you do is see a little stand like this. That's another bad stand. See, it's wibbly wobbly, a little wibbly wobbly, a little bit over, and boom, burning things, and burning things, and burning more things, and maybe blowing up things like this. So bad stand. I don't like these stands. You gotta be really careful with them. So let's turn this torchma thing on. Turn it up a little bit. There we go. See, got your little torch thing. All right. So what you want to do is put your torchma thing on here. Get a little gas. Light it up. Oh, see right there, it's lit. It's gonna heat the tip, just the tip. And then what you'll be able to do is, once this tip's heated up, go ahead and solder your thingamajigs right there. And then once you're done, then you grab that, right? Nope, don't grab that. That's hot right now. So that's what this chintzy little stand is for. So you can just stand it up and oops! Oh man! And you just ruined your thing. So I don't know. It's good in a pinch. You don't need wires, don't need connectors, don't need to plug it in. Maybe buy one of these, throw it in the back of your truck or your car. If you're, on the roadside and you need either a torch or a soldering iron, might be good to have. It's got little attachments here for soldering larger areas, but never use these. So here's the butane. Other things that I actually don't have with me right now that are kind of one-stop shop, go. The soldering guns. A lot of people like to use the soldering guns. Me personally, no. They're pretty powerful, really clunky, kind of hard to get your hand around, or get into a tight space to try and solder. I know some people suggest you use guns, but personally I don't. It's not really worth it. Also, there's kind of new-ish types called conductive irons, and what they do is they kind of call them like cold solderers or something like that, because basically you could solder right away and then touch the tip and it won't be hot, that kind of stuff. So never really tried any of those. It could be okay, but again, you can't really control the heat. Probably good in a pinch, or small enough to slip in your pocket. You're out at a convention, can't get back to your room to solder, you need to solder something real quick, boom, you're done, that kind of stuff. I'd say the same with the butane, but I don't think they'll let you into a convention with the butane. It's a little too boom boom. So, but the conductive iron, never really used it. But again, it's not a can't control the heat. All right, that brings you to my favorite type of iron, the temperature control iron. Let's see if we can get in here. You can see that it's got this little knobby here. You can actually control the temperature that you can go to. So the pros on this, of course, obviously you can control the heat. Why is it better than any other iron? Hot is hot, melts solder, doesn't matter, doobly-boo. The reason why it's better is that there's a powerful heating coil inside of here, and it's got a thermistor to regulate the heat. So the heating coil could actually heat this iron way past what this says, but it doesn't. So why would you care about that? Well, say you got this tiny little teeny tip and you go to solder something big. When you solder something big and it's cold, this little guy will kick into high gear to make up the temperature difference, because it'll notice a drop in the temperature of the iron. Then when it gets cold, it cranks on full heat, high, tries to keep that temperature as steady as it can. So these irons can actually get hotter than these little guys, or these little guys. This has no room for this type of coil. Look at that. You see? You can't see that there. Look at that. See, it's got cooling. It's got a big heater in there. So there's no room for a big heater in this guy. So you can set it to a temperature, hit something really cold, boom, this thing kicks into high gear to try and to even out the temperature. So you heat things up much faster and you'll get a more consistent temperature with these. So it won't overheat, damage this tip right here, get too hot. These things can't regulate the heat. If they're full bore, they're full bore. So that's another reason why. Not very pricey. They are more expensive. You're gonna spend anywhere $50, $100, $200. But I think if you're gonna be doing some soldering, it's worth the money to get one of these guys. Also, good thing about these is these interchangeable tips. So you can unscrew this guy here. There's your heating element there. This tip will push out of the bottom. You can actually get all different types of tips for this guy. Get like fine needle tips, standard tips, wedge tips, larger tips. So it's good for it's also nice because when you're working with foam, and sometimes people have issues, iron's too hot, it's melting too fast, you can turn this sucker down, figure out a nice temperature where you're taking nice cuts into the foam without burning it too much. So you can also regulate the temperature down. That helps out a lot. So another thing about these irons is these irons will typically give you more parts. So you can see right here, I can take this off, buy another one of these things if it breaks, and they'll typically come with a cleaning trough, hold your sponge, clean off the tip of your iron, that kind of stuff. Be integrated. Some of them do have separate arms and troughs. I would suggest not to go with those. Simply the fact of, you know, you're dealing with this kind of thing again, where, you know, you're putting it in your trough and flicking around, and, you know, like, you know, you're oh my god, it's hot, I need to put it down, and, you know, you hit it and it just buggers off again, like, you know, flies over there, whatever. So this is nice because it's integrated into the iron. Iron's a steady, heavy thing, you know, boom, you're pushing it in there, you know, you need to get it in there quick or whatever. Like, this thing's not going, this thing's not flying off the table. And, you know, it's even got little adjustable angles. You can actually adjust the angle here, how it goes. So, good irons. That's a good iron. Alright, so since my tip is so dirty and bad and old, it's been a long time since I changed this out. So I'll show you guys how to change it out. What you want to do is buy some tips. Buy them in a bag or buy them one by one, whatever. So sometimes these guys will come pre-tinned. Sometimes you gotta tin them. Well, what's tinning? Tinning is conditioning this tip here. Let me see if I can focus a little better on the tip. So tinning is preparing this tip so that you can solder with it. Solder will stick to it, and solder won't go rolling off of this thing whenever you try and heat it up. So if you don't know if it's tinned or not, just tin it anyway. You'll notice right away if it's been tinned. So I got some points here. Let's take our pointy tip, like, kind of match it up here. So first thing, iron is off, not hot, not hot, not hot. Doesn't sizzle, no bacon. As long as it doesn't sound like bacon, you're good to go. Well, not always. It could still be really hot. So I'll take this guy off. There's the old tip. Take this guy off. My iron's the tip is so old, the sleeve came out. Alright. There we go. New heating element. There we go. Gotta tighten that down. Get her nice and tight. Then we're ready for tinning. Got your new tip on there. What we're gonna do is gonna start with a cold soldering iron. Make sure this sucker's cold. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn it up. Turn it up to maximum heat. Boom, right there. We're gonna turn it on. Gonna immediately get our solder. Make sure you wind out a bit of solder, because this is gonna take a bit of solder. What you're gonna do is you're just gonna touch this with the end of the iron and leave it there. Then it's gonna start to melt. Just keep feeding it, keep feeding it, keep feeding it. Twist your iron while you're feeding it. What you wanna do, switch the focus again. What you wanna do is coat the entire outside of the top third or so of this tip, half to a third. Just coat that whole tip there, and just keep feeding it in, keep feeding it in, keep feeding it in, and twisting until she can't take anymore. She's completely coated. She's got solder on her, and the solder's staying on it. So let's fix her focus again. Let's do this. All right, on. Gonna rest this on here. Maybe we'll speed it up too. Gonna wait till she starts chooching. This is the exciting part. There we go. It's starting. Okay. I think this guy's already been tinned, but I'll kind of show you. I'll still show you, make sure you guys understand. A lot of smoke, so make sure you're in a ventilated area. Again, But just keep feeding this in, keep feeding this in, keep feeding that rosin, keep feeding that solder until it's completely coated. And we get up to temperature. Just keep feeding it in. Alright, max temperature. You can see my lights turning off. Means it's reached max temperature. Alright, now she's holding some solder here all the way around. All the way around, all the way around, yep. So you can see if I can hold it up there. You can see it's all coated with solder. Another way you can tell really nice is when you wipe it off. She'll have kind of a, here, focus. It'll have kind of a brazed part of the iron right in here, and then the tip will be silver. So, alright, so we got her tinned, and she's ready to go. Alright, next thing we're going to go over is type of solder. I know we touched on it a little bit in the first video, but I'm going to go in just a touch more detail this time around. So when you buy solder, typically you get it with these numbers: 60-40, 63-37, 50-50. Well, what is that? So first number is the amount of tin by weight in this little wire. Second number is the amount of lead which is in this. So typically with electronics and what you guys are going to be dealing with, 60-40, 63-37, whatever, you're gonna want lead in it. Why? Because it's easier to heat up, it's easier to put things together, and you don't really care about how hygienic it is, or eating it, or you're having it in your drink water, or that kind of stuff. So that's why they have other types of solders, which are called lead-free solders. You guys aren't going to need to be dealing with that kind of stuff, because that takes a heap amount of heat. You're going to crank this sucker all the way up, or use a torch, that kind of stuff, to try and melt that stuff. So electronics soldering, 60-40. Also, you can get solder in different widths. I would suggest a thinner width, only because, like in the previous video I stated, thinner width will have more rosin per inch than a thicker one. And the way I was learned to solder is you don't need to brush on that flux. Here's some flux. This is what it kind of looks like, if I can get it open. Alright, I'm going to play with it a little bit, try and get it open. Okay, there we go. It kind of looks like Carmex. There you go. There's your rosin. Sometimes it'll come in a jar with a little brush. A lot of people like to take the rosin or the flux, brush it on, and then use fluxless solder on there. That guys don't really need to worry about. Reason why? Let's get into flux. So what flux does is it removes oxidation, and it prevents air inside the workspace of the solder. It also increases the control of the solder. So basically why people want to brush on flux is because they don't want the solder to go, say you're soldering a long piece of something here, and you only want to solder like this part here. So you're going to put your flux right here, and then you're going to put your iron down there, put your solder in, and it's only going to really fill in that point. You'll notice if you try and feed it more solder, it'll just kind of bubble up, in that point, because there's no flux. The flux helps it with, like, I guess it's called capillary action, So you'll notice when they solder copper pipes, that you want a flux. Use the wipe-on flux, because you wipe the flux on the pipe, then you kind of shove it into the socket. That way, when you heat it up and you put your solder in, your solder's gonna wick up inside there where the flux is through capillary action. But you guys aren't gonna need to deal with any of that kind of stuff. So save a headache of buying too many things. Just get some rosin core solder. Be a little bit better in the end. Because this thin stuff will shoot enough rosin in there to where you'll be able to solder wires together or things, the circuit boards, that kind of stuff. You won't have to worry about, oh, where's my flux? I need to put the flux on before I put the solder on. Well, no. Got rosin core, all in one. When you're done, boom. All right. So this section, see if I can actually do this. I want to get into some soldering now. That's ready to go. Let's do this. Got our iron, got our brand new tip. Brand new tip's tinned, cleaned off, raring to go. So let's do it. So first solder is not going to be the best solder. First 10 solders, maybe first 20, maybe first 30 or 40 or 50, but you'll eventually start to get the hang of it and how solder works, how it behaves. How you can tell a good solder joint from a bad solder joint, if it's cold or if it's got too hot or, fed too much, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like welding, you got to get out there and start welding, get experience on it to kind of figure out how it behaves, You got to get yourself some junk PC boards, practice on those things, practice your soldering techniques, your desoldering techniques. And you'll eventually learn how it works. So what's cold solder joint? Cold solder joint is when you don't heat the pad or the pin that you're soldering enough. And what happens is the solder won't adhere itself to either one. Typically, cold solder joint will, the easiest way you can tell is that there's not a complete pool of solder around the pin itself, or the solder on that pin or on that hole will be kind of bubbled up, meaning there's the solder was hot enough to flow over the top, but it wasn't hot enough to penetrate into that hole. So let's see if I can do a cold solder joint here. Not really. Didn't work out very well. So that's actually a pretty good solder joint right there. So what you'll notice is you got a nice pool of solder. The pin's got solder around it. The pad is fully engorged with solder. And if you flip it over, you can't see it, but because there's no pad on this side, but there's solder inside that hole. Yep, you can see there's solder. Well, you can't really see, but you can see that the solder's kind of crept up the pin on this side, right here. So the solder's gone through the hole, and it's actually adhered to the pin. So it's kind of wicked itself up in there. So let's do that again. Now what I'm doing is I'm contacting the pad and the pin at the same time, waiting a second, feeding it a little solder, watching it suck up in there, lifting the iron away, and boom, you're done. So you don't want to heat these guys up too much. If you heat them up too much, the resin underneath that's holding the pad down is going to lift off. Like really easy, really easy. Believe me, I've done it. I've done it my fair share of times. So let's try it again. Heat both the pin and the pad. Get your solder in there. Now there you can see that's a cold solder joint right there. How can you tell? Here, let's move these out of the way so I can get in there. See how the pad doesn't have complete solder on it? That means the pad didn't have time to heat completely up so that the solder could adhere itself all the way around. So how do you fix that? Well, just heat it up again. Feed a little bit more solder. and you're good to go. Now what do you do with this extra? You'll learn later how to kind of lift solder off of there. You'll notice that solder will stick to itself. Just like any other liquid, solder will stick to itself. So oftentimes what I find myself doing, say I've heated this guy up, and I've loaded way too much solder on there. Look at that. That's way too much solder. You can see how it's sticking to itself. So I lifted it away. So did you see how much solder I lifted away from that joint? Clean my iron off. Lift some more away. See how that lifted away? Clean my iron off. Let it cool down a bit. I can smell it burning. Remember, don't get it too hot. Lift some more of that solder away, and just keep going until you've got just enough solder on there. Alrighty, nooch. Next thing I'm going to show you is a socket, in case you ever need to solder a socket to a board. What I'll typically do is put the socket in there, flip it over onto the board, and then what you can do is take opposite pins and solder them down. 1 pin, 2 pin. Now what that is doing is holding it in place. So let me get your camera up here real quick. What I'm going to do now is hold this and actually heat that up while I'm pushing down on the socket to make sure that this is, there we go, that's flush with the board there. And then same with the other. I'm not doing too much pressure. If you do too much pressure, you might push out that little pin there. So just a little bit of pressure, heat it up, push it down, make sure it's flat. Here, let's see. Looks pretty flat to me, right? Good job. All right. Let's go back down here. I'll show you how to finish this guy off. So I've seen a lot of people that do the technique of 1 pin at a time, 1 pin at a time, 1 pin at a time, 1 pin at a time. I learned really quickly when I did soldering that you don't really have to do, since these pins are so close together, what you want to do is just kind of, what you're going to do is kind of heat them up and just train them down like that. And what that'll do is it'll even out the amount of solder. And what it's going to do is the iron's going to heat the next pin, so that when I'm feeding it solder, it's just going to automatically go to the next pin, go to the next pin, go to the next pin, and you'll see how much faster it goes. Now this does take a little bit of practice, so again, I would suggest, finding an old garbage through-hole board like this, just practice on it. Practice heating it up. Practice heating it up too much. How long did it take, to get too hot, that kind of thing. But what you want to do is just train it, feed it solder, train it, feed it solder, feed it solder, boom, done. I'll see that again. Let's do that on this side. Heat it up, put your solder in, train it, feed your solder, train, boom. Now you can see those last 2 pins I bridged, but guess what? What we just learned, solder's going to stick to itself. So put a little bit of solder on here, and boom, look at that. Pull that solder right off of there. So what I'll do is I have another socket here. Where'd it go? It's a longer socket, so maybe you can see a little bit faster, or a little bit more, how easy this will get. So let me just do that same thing, opposite corners, put a little solder, and then let's do it again. Here comes the solder train, coming down the tracks, going in the tunnel. Choo choo, heat it up, boom, 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 boom. Look how fast that was, boom. Perfect solders all the way down. See it again? Here we go. Heat it up. Feed your solder. Boom, 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 boom. There you go. Done. Look at that. Gives you nice consistent solder. And as long as you're feeding that pool, making it big, it's going to suck down the amount of solder that it needs to fill up that hole. So, and then like you learned before, at the end, if you got a little bridge here, too much solder, wipe it off, clean it, a little bit of solder, boom, lift that excess off, and you're done. Boom. Alright, so you've soldered your pieces on, but what happens if you got the wrong piece on there and you need to get that solder out? Well, what you can use is braided wire, or you can get yourself one of these solder suckers. Basically, push the plunger down, clicks. When you push the button, the little vacuum sucks the solder up with this tip here. Now the one that I personally used was the solder sucker here, because braided wire works in a pinch, but for me is not preferred. So let's go over how that gets done. Alright, so say you want to take this part out because you either got it wrong or you actually need the part or whatever. You want to get that solder out of there. So what you want to do is actually feed it more solder. What you're doing, since you got that rosin core, is it's putting more rosin in there to help it to wick out. Because for the wicking type, this type here, you actually want to get a lot of flux on there so that it transfers to the wick correctly. What you want to do is heat up the wick first so that it gets nice and hot and it can wick that solder away. And this is kind of why I don't like wick. So see how that wick filled up with solder? You gotta move the wick to a different part that's not saturated with solder anymore, and then wick some more. And you'll see that solder suck up in through there. Now you see how it pulled that solder out? So you just keep wicking and wicking until that solder's all gone, or there's barely any left. What I'm going to show you next is my preferred way, is with the solder sucker. So what you want to do is, again, feed it more solder so you can get more rosin and more solder on there. And you want to get your guy primed here, primed and ready. It's all ready to go, locked and loaded. Now this is kind of the tricky part. It takes practice. You're going to heat that pin until the solder's liquid. Pooch this guy on there, hit the button, and suck that solder right out of there. Let's see if I can do it first try. Heat it up, get it on there, boom, look at that. Dry hole, one shot. Still got it. Alright, for this next part, we're going to briefly cover pins for connectors. So when you guys get connectors like these suckers, and you open them up, and they got those little pins inside, that's what these suckers are. So if you ever want to make yourself a connector, here's a very basic way of wiring up a connector pin. So if you'll notice, there's two little tongs here, that fat one there and that thin one there. That thin one is to clamp over the shielding of the wire, which is this part here. And that larger part there, that's for actually clamping over the wire itself. So what you want to do is, when you go to crimp it, and you better get some nice crimpers. Don't use those cheapo ones that come. Where is it? These guys. These guys won't have what you're looking for. Those are different kind of crimps. You want to get some nice Molex crimpers. It's got the little domed teeth. See how they're domed? They're meant for if you notice, there's a little, makes like a little M pattern. What that's going to do is it's going to fold those crimps over so that they go into the wire or into the shielding. So you'll want to get yourself some crimpers with those the little M guys. And what you'll want to do is when you crimp it, get in there. Okay, that guy is going to go around the shield. The other piece is going to go around the wire. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, now you can see how, whoop, got a little stray hair there. A little stray hair never hurt no one, unless it's in someone's soup. So you can see that it's crimped. The first part's crimped over the wire, second part's crimped over the shielding. It's exactly what you want. So you don't have to solder these. Sometimes people don't, but it was my practice when I worked on soldering that it's good practice to solder, just to make sure it's made the connection. So what you'll want to do, again, you can put a little bit on your iron, hit the back of this guy, wait for it to heat up, wick a little bit of solder in there, boom, you're done. Oh, now you might get a little tail on it. See that little tail? Take that sucker right off. Boom. Done. No more tail. So some pins, and I don't have an example here, but I'll show you one in the picture. Some pins have a little tail on the back of them. And what you'll have to do is you'll have to watch out when you're soldering. Don't solder that tail, because that tail is what keeps that pin inside of that socket. All right, solder some wires. That's what you came here for, right? So what you want to do is make sure both of the wires are heated enough so that the solder wicks inside the conductors. Very similar to the PC board, where we wanted to make sure that the solder wicked into the hole and adhered to the pin. We want to make sure that both of these wires are hot enough to wick solder through. So what I'll show you right now is, let's pull out a little, let's heat it up, pull out a little premature. Now look, that there's a cold solder joint. See how it's not adhering to both of the wires? One wire it's wicked through a little bit, but the other wire is still hanging on by a thread. So that's a bad cold solder joint. You can see the wires aren't saturated with the solder. They're not connected very well. So one trick is when you're soldering something that's really big, put a little bit of solder on your iron and then hold it on the other side of the joint. What you want to do is just kind of pull the solder across. And what that does is it increases the surface area of your iron so that it can heat up more area. So now you can see it's starting to heat up nice. Now these are bigger wires, so your wires aren't going to take quite this long to solder. But you can see now, look. Now it's taking solder on this side. It's getting hot enough. Get that joint saturated. Once it starts to heat up, you can start warming it up from multiple sides. This is really thick wire, but you can see now that both of these wires are quite saturated with solder now. Those guys are stuck together. They're not twisted very well, but they're stuck together now into a joint. I'll show you in a different video on actually twisting wires together proper. I did heat these up a little bit too much. You can see the shielding is starting to peel away. So that's what happens when you heat it up too much. I'm using too big a wire. These wires are huge. So they're gonna need to heat it up quite a bit to get this joint saturated with solder. But when you're working with smaller wires, it's gonna take you less heat, less time to get up to temperature. So one thing to do is if you notice that you're feeding too much solder in, like the solder's getting away from you, pull your iron away a little bit. If you keep feeding, and then when it gets stuck, put your iron back on there and feed it more. But that's how you do yourself wire. Alright, so went over the type of irons, kind of irons you got, how to clean your iron, cleaning techniques, some of the other stuff. Went over kind of soldering PC boards, then how to kind of get rid of extra solder you don't need. And by the way, these two desoldering things, they work for more than just PC boards. But again, I like this one a lot better than the other one. So, and they're cheap, really cheap. Went over types of solder, and then soldering two wires together, soldering on a PC board, soldering a connector, little pin that you can put inside a connector, and then the crimpers for the connector. So next time I think we're just gonna go over just wires. So it's probably the one that you guys have been waiting for this whole time. So I'll try and devote an entire video to that. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you guys want to see that wire as soon as it comes out. Hopefully it'll be out in the next couple weeks. Real busy right now, but trying to get these videos out, crank them out. So hope you guys had a good one. See ya!